Afternoon to some and good morning to others. We want to thank you for joining us today. We're just going to give another minute or two to ensure people have been let into the room and they do not miss any of the fabulous content that we will be sharing today. Also, as a reminder, the chat feature is turned off. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box as the chat feature is disabled. Once again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to start right at 12 noon. As I can see by the participant list that people are steadily being let into the room. So we will start in 1 minute. Welcome. Thank you for joining us at the first workforce webinar presented by the National ECE Workforce Center. We are so glad that you took time out of your schedule to hear from our fabulous panels. And we will start the webinar with greetings and words from Colleen Rathgar. Hopefully I pronounced her last name correctly, who is the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development on behalf of Administration of Children and Families. Colleen?
Thank you, Tanya. I really am glad to be with you here today to start off this webinar and have really an opportunity to learn about all of the ways that state and local leaders are creating and sustaining workforce compensation increases from funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and other relief funds. I want to start about what is needed to strengthen and stabilize the early care and $600 billion investment that the president has asked for. So I just wanted to start with knowing that this is a department that I work with that understands what the real investments are, but we really are very excited to hear more about the strategies from ARP, even though, as folks know, we are in a wind down of those fundings. But I think it's important about what we'll hear today about the ways to sustain, but also about how that funding has been used. And how additional funding and how that really talks about how additional funding that is being called for in the early care and education community could and would also be used. You know, we've seen these strategies that all of you have employed and seen how meaningful they are. And so while we understand that this is a difficult time with the phasing out, it's also really important time to be telling that story and telling how states and tribes and early childhood community broadly has used this money, how thoughtfully and effective it has been, really goes a long way to talk about and to show that this is a community. You all are a community that knows how to before the pandemic. We know they haven't gotten easier. We know that right now grantors, the ARP funding is phasing out. But we also know that many states have supplemental funding that they can use to continue supports for the early childhood workforce. And I just think it's really important as we move forward that we think about this and think about how we tell the story of these investments and what we can learn from them as we think more broadly about what is needed in a bigger picture. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm so pleased to have the National Center for the Early Childhood Workforce that can help bring conversations like this and resources together to support the field in doing just that. So with that, I will turn it back to Tanya. Thank you.
Almost started talking on mute. Thank you, Colleen. Once again, we want to thank you all for joining us today. Please know that the chat feature is turned off, and please place all questions in the Q&A feature. This webinar is being recorded. It will be emailed out along with the materials that are shared in the webinar to everyone who registered. Also, it will be located on the National ECE Workforce Center's website and our YouTube channel, so that all of this information is forthcoming. Next slide. We would like to get started with a poll, so we're asking everyone to please share with us which region you are joining from today. Please take the time to find your region on the map that we have provided, and the poll should be coming up. Is visible. Fortunately, it does not appear that the poll is visible. Well, we'll come back to that because we only have a little bit of time, and we want to make sure our panelists have an opportunity to share with you all of the great work that they are doing. So next slide. Here is our agenda for today. I am Tanya Costin. Sorry, we're a little off filter. I'm Tanya Costin. I'm one of the co-directors for the National ECE Workforce Center, and I oversee technical assistance. Once again, we've had our remarks from our Deputy Assistant Secretary, so we definitely want to thank Colleen for taking the time to join us. From here, we will talk a little bit about the history of the ARPA funding, and then lessons learned, and then our facilitated conversation with our early care and education leaders, and that will be followed by Q&A. And of course, we want to recognize those who not only funded this project, but definitely are partners in this work, that as we continue to really come together and figure out what we can do to strengthen the workforce and really support each and every one of you who touch the early childhood workforce. And that is done by having varied perspectives to address all of the issues that are before us. So we definitely want to thank our federal partners for their partnership in this work. And here are the objectives for today's webinar that we hope all of you will leave with, and that you will find useful in the work that you are doing as you look forward for what's ahead of you, sustaining wages and salaries that were started for many of you under COVID relief. We definitely want to make sure that we're not just sharing information, but definitely highlighting successful strategies and things that are actionable for you to go back and to figure out what's next for your state, your program, and in the context of what you're dealing with. So hopefully poll 2 will work. So we're asking everyone to take the opportunity to let us know what level that you are working at and how you connect to the early childhood workforce. We're just going to give everybody another 30 seconds to vote. And we'll share the responses. So our largest group have identified themselves as programs, followed by regional, and then followed by national. Those are the top 3. So thank you for sharing that with us. It helps us as we sort of focus our conversation that we're having today. Now that we've gone over the primary objectives and our agenda, and we've provided, we will now turn it over to Caitlin McLean from the Center for the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at the University at Berkeley. And so I'm sorry, I keep messing that up. I apologize. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin.
Thank you, Tanya. No worries. It is a mouthful. Definitely appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here today. I have 2 roles. I'm Director of Multi-State Programs at the Berkeley Center for the Study of Child Care Employment, as Tanya mentioned. I'm also a member of the steering committee for our new National ECE Workforce Center. And I'm really excited that today we're here to learn from leaders across the country who have been taking action to improve compensation for early childhood educators, especially in this pivotal moment as American Rescue Plan funds, which have been really a critical lifeline, are beginning to expire. But we know that there are many opportunities for state and local leaders to keep up the momentum and build on the progress that has been made to date. At the Berkeley Center for the Study of Child Care Employment, we've been convening leaders from 7 states in our Bold on Early Educator Compensation Learning Community for the past 2 years to learn about how leaders like yourselves have been improving wages and benefits with American Rescue Plan funds and with other funds. And in particular, how they've been planning ahead to continue these initiatives once these time-limited funds expire. And I'm very happy to say that a few of those leaders are represented on our panel today. So what have we been learning from this Bold on Compensation learning community? One thing we've learned is that leaders are pursuing many different strategies to improve compensation or provide financial relief for early educators. Things like providing grants to programs, sometimes with requirements or incentives to use those grants to raise wages, provide bonuses, or provide benefits, really helping programs with the financial resources they need to focus on compensation. In other places, they've been making payments direct to educators to help supplement their wages. We also know that folks have been creating salary scales that can be used in cost models and other efforts to ensure that programs have appropriate funding to increase wages. And we also know that states have been thinking about how to provide benefits to early childhood educators, an issue that has long been difficult for folks to think about how to solve. So we know that in some places, they've been paying healthcare premiums for early childhood educators. And in others, they've been thinking about how to make sure early childhood educators themselves have access to childcare by making sure that they have eligibility for childcare subsidies. So we know that folks have been pursuing a lot of different really great strategies, but the biggest challenge that we've heard is how to sustainably fund increases to compensation, especially as ARPA ends. And so that's why we're really here today to talk about what can be done. And we know that some leaders are creatively identifying other sources of federal funding, such as PDG Birth through 5 grants, state and local fiscal recovery funds to help extend their initiatives. As just one example, in Rhode Island, they're using TANF funds to support Head Start and early Head Start programs to increase compensation to attract and retain qualified staff. We know other communities have been raising their own sources of state and local funding to continue their initiatives. Next slide, please. So today, we'll hear more about many of these strategies, what has been successful, what has been challenging, and how can we continue to improve compensation for early educators moving forward. We'll hear from panelists in a variety of contexts, state and local, representing different geographic and political contexts, because we know that what works in one place may not work in another. Nevertheless, we'll highlight common themes and ideas that you can consider taking forward in your own community. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. First, we have Lori Nash, Youth and Family Services Manager from Johnson County Social Services, Iowa City, Iowa. Welcome, Lori. We have Michelle Wood, Bureau Chief of Quality Initiatives from the Illinois Department of Human Services. Welcome, Michelle. We have Jose Mendez, Director of Child Care Business Operations and Facilities from the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care. Welcome, Jose. And finally, we have Amy Whitehood-Flo, Head Start State Collaboration Office Director, also from the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care. So welcome and thank you to all of you for being with us today. Really appreciate it. What we want to do is just start off with hearing a little bit about some of the different strategies that each of you have been pursuing in your communities. So we'll start with you, Lori. Lori, you all have been doing some exciting work to raise wages for early educators in Johnson County in Iowa. What should folks in other communities know about what you're doing and what you're learning?
Great, thank you. I will first kind of give an update or an overview of what our strategy is, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how we got there. The current strategy that we are using is a wage enhancement program. And so for eligible programs and employees, we provide $2 an hour as a supplemental wage for full-time permanent classroom staff. Our funding is also used to pay the 7.65% payroll tax that centers would, the program would have to cover. So we didn't want our program to cost a center to participate, so we do cover payroll taxes as well. And really, we came to this after the pandemic. We heard stories of closed classrooms, of empty slots, because there weren't enough staff in the programs for them to be fully functional. We did a survey of all of the child care centers in our county, and it was a phone survey, and we asked, what are your challenges? What do you think would be helpful? We surveyed about current wages, about numbers of staff, empty slots, empty classrooms, and this seemed to be a way for us to meet the immediate need. The state of Iowa had a recruitment and retention bonus program, and what we heard from some of them was that some staff stayed around long enough to get the bonus, and then they left for a better paying job. So we were trying to think, how can we stretch that bonus out over time and really help solidify that workforce. We had really good buy-in from our county leaders. They had identified childcare as a major priority for using the ARPA funds, and we went to them with this proposal. It was also a priority of the city of Iowa City, so this is jointly funded by the county and the city. We then have programs that are enrolled and staff that are enrolled, and we on a monthly basis provide reimbursement. So the center pays the $2 an hour enhancement first, and then we reimburse them. And I'll save the rest for later unless there are other questions.
I think we'll keep going for now. Thank you, Lori, so much. Michelle, we'll turn to you next. You have several initiatives to improve ECE compensation in Illinois. Can you give us a quick overview of what you think is most promising about what you all are doing?
Sure. There are several Smart Start Illinois initiatives that I'd like to highlight. So Governor Pritzker has put a heavy investment in early childhood education through the Smart Start Illinois initiatives, which are a continuation of our ARPA and COVID relief dollars. So it's a 4-year investment, although that is subject to sufficient appropriation by our General Assembly, of course. So the first is the grant program, which this year is called Smart Start Transition Grants. That will carry over into workforce compensation contracts in fiscal year 25. So that will kind of mirror those grant programs that we had in previous years. Then we have our Smart Start Quality Supports Grants, which was our Accelerate pilot, which places a heavy emphasis on raising the pay scale according to credentials, but also places an important part on mentoring leaders within the facility, so that way the teachers have the proper supports within the organization to mentor those people receiving the extra credentials. So we are rolling out the first iteration of the quality supports program through that. And in FY25, we're going to beef up that program per se. So this year we kind of held steady with the number of programs that were in the pilot, and we're going to put more programs. And we just kicked off our Illinois Early Childhood Apprenticeship pilot this fiscal year with a $2 million investment. It is a registered apprenticeship through the Department of Labor. So this is a pretty exciting time. We have 4 apprenticeship sites. So it is intended to have all of the sites, no matter if they're an apprentice or not, so they have to be in college. We give them enough funding to raise wages to the base wage floor. That's meant in our cost model to raise wages for their entire staff. So that's pretty exciting, but it's also, there's a mentorship piece through our partners at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So we're working with them to provide on-site mentorship for these apprentices. So that is pretty exciting. And then we also have our ECACE scholarship program that has a pretty heavy investment using ARPA funding this year, and it's continuing into fiscal year 25. So that is another investment that the governor has put in. So I think I will pass it back to Caitlin so she can.
Thanks, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already getting a lot of questions from the audience. For the most part, we'll come back to these later, but there were just a couple specific ones for Lori. So I'm just going to stop and ask you a couple of those, Lori, before we keep going. Apologies about the street sweeping. walking by right now. Hope that's not too loud. Almost gone. So Lori, one question was if you could repeat about what the $2 an hour was for. It sounded like you may have cut out a little bit, folks missed that. And then if you could talk a little bit about, was that just for license programs? Were there any qualifications for getting that supplemental wage?
Sure. So the $2 per hour is for staff in licensed childcare centers. They need to be full-time, which we defined as 32 hours a week or more. And they need to be in the classroom for those 32 hours. Because our intent was really to open up slots in classrooms, we focused on classroom staff. And it is just those classroom staff that are eligible. In order to prioritize, because we have limited funds, we have $1.5 million over 3 years. And so to prioritize programs, the program does need to accept our state childcare assistance, state and federally funded childcare assistance, and have spots open for those families. They also need to participate in the voluntary quality rating system. And so at any level, but in some sort of a quality rating system. So those are kind of the qualifications. They also need to pay our county recommended minimum wage for their full-time staff. So we wanted to have at least some buy-in from the program that they have a baseline minimum wage, which our county minimum wage is higher than our state minimum wage. And so we did have that as a requirement as well. And was there another part to that?
I think you got it all. It was if they were just for licensed programs, any qualifications. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we'll keep those questions coming. Like I said, we'll have a whole period toward the end where we take a ton of questions. For now, if you do have a clarifying question for one of the panelists, feel free to pop that in there. So with that, I want to turn it over to you, Jose. In Massachusetts, you all have been doing something somewhat similar to Illinois Smart Start grants. Can you tell us more about what you're trying to accomplish with your grants and how you're building off of what you began with ARP funds?
Sure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. So in Massachusetts, we have the Child Care Stabilization Fund. And the focus of it was generally to ensure that childcare providers were maintaining their operations and were keeping their doors open. Of course, when the pandemic initially hit, we had a pretty dramatic steep loss of the total number of licensed slots that were available. And part of our effort was to make sure we stymied those losses and ensure that the providers had what they needed to maintain their childcare centers so that they can continue operating until we got past the worst part of the pandemic. And so initially started with ARPA and in a combination of CRSSA or Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Funds. And then this past fiscal year, we transitioned to fully state funded, level funded, equivalent to the dollars that we received during the previous fiscal year. The program has a number of allowable expenses that include everything from payroll to professional development to investments in program quality, such as supplies and curriculum, as well as opportunities for childcare centers to utilize those funds for rent and mortgage payments or even facility maintenance. And so I think, like my direct supervisor would say, as Deputy Commissioner Jocelyn Bound, the beauty of what we were doing was the flexibility that we were offering within limits, of course, and to support providers so that they can make choices about how they felt that they could support their operations and keep their doors open.
Thanks so much, Jose. That's terrific. And can I just ask, do you know, do you have any data or have you just heard from providers about how they've been using the grants? Do you know if, how much they were using it to try to raise wages or provide bonuses? Any information like that?
Sure. We actually implemented biannual resurveys to providers across the state. And the primary usage of the funds, as is being reported by the providers, is to support existing payroll and benefits. Over the time of this grant, we have seen pay rates rise over time. Of course, while we can to some extent attribute that to the child care stabilization funds being available to those providers, we also know that there are also inflation implications that are also forcing those rates to go up as well.
Great, thanks so much. All right, so we're gonna stick with Massachusetts and turn it over to you, Amy. So you all are also working specifically with your Head Start programs, putting in state funds with the goal of supporting the workforce. Can you say more about what you're trying to do and what you've learned so far?
Sure, yeah. Thanks so much, Caitlin, and thanks so much to the National ECE Workforce Center for having this conversation to begin with. As Jose had mentioned about our childcare stabilization funds, we also are making state investments in our Head Start and Early Head Start programs across the Commonwealth. And the way in which we're doing that is through the Head Start State Supplemental Grant. So for this fiscal year, FY24, it's an investment of $16.5 million. Those funds are available to all of our federal Head Start and Early Head Start grant recipients. This is a fund that primarily, as you mentioned, goes to workforce support, but also quality support. Currently, 94% of those funds are budgeted for workforce support. The other 6 is in the form of high quality durable goods or curricular supports or professional learning opportunities for staff. As far as the workforce compensation component is concerned, that could take, highly flexible from program to program kind of form. And there is overall anything from a major investment in recruiting and retaining highly qualified staff to incentive programs to directly funding particular positions. We did a little bit of number crunching and wanted to focus specifically on programs that were supporting mental health or social emotional wellness within their programs. 61% of our grantees are investing some of those educator compensation funds into that particular type of a support for children and families. So I think what makes this fund a little bit kind of a standout is the flexibility, but it is a grant that is offered on a kind of grantee by grantee basis. And so one of the topics that I find really interesting is the ways in which states and communities are making that choice, whether to support individual educators or staff, kind of like you're doing in Iowa, Lori, or thinking about how are you providing funding to programs as a whole to then make quality investments or investments in workforce, which is the approach that we've taken in Massachusetts so far. So yeah, happy to answer any additional questions about the Head Start State Supplemental Grant.
Thanks so much, Amy. So I'm hearing a couple of themes coming out so far. One of those is really around the importance of public funding, right? Hopefully it's something we're all aware of these days, but I think it bears repeating that we can't expect programs to come up with this money on their own. Programs have been struggling for years, for decades before the pandemic hit, and things have just exacerbated since then. And so, we know that addressing the compensation crisis really means public funding. And so it was so great to hear from each of you about how you've been creatively thinking about, where can we use federal funds, where can we put our own state funds into this, and really prioritize this issue. One thing that came up from the audience is a question about how do we know if our states have supplemental funding to continue the work that ARP funds were being used to support. So I don't know, this may be from an educator or from a program. I'm just curious if any of you want to speak to, maybe some communication strategies that you've used in your states to make sure that programs are aware, or if you have any thoughts on this issue.
Well, I can speak on behalf of our program for EC Massachusetts. We've taken every opportunity to reach out to providers and let them know of the transition that was occurring. I think a big concern for many other providers across the state was whether or not the program itself was going to continue, and whether or not the state was going to continue supporting it, especially at level funding. And so when we obviously got the go-ahead from the current administration's office, that we were moving forward with continuing the child care stabilization program, we did massive outreach. A lot of it was focused around ensuring providers that there will be no disruption from fiscal year to fiscal year, so that they can continue counting on these funds and supporting their operations as they are now.
In Illinois, we are doing quite a bit of outreach and press releases regarding the Smart Start initiatives. What we are doing now is holding focus groups and really doing a lot of outreach to providers, childcare homes, TNTA providers, to try to really reach what the challenges were with the Smart Start, Strengthen and Grow grants, to try to really design the workforce compensation contracts into FY25. So that way we are trying to eliminate any barriers and really get the input from the field, because they are the ones that are going to be utilizing the program, because we really want this to be sustainable. And also their input matters, right? They're the ones that, and we're also going through an impact project through the Office of Child Care to really help us as a department decide how this work, how we're providing technical assistance to the field is rolled out. Like, we really want this to, we really want to get it right for the field, and making sure that we're providing the right services to children and families. So that's what but there's been a lot of outreach, public relations through our agency partners, press releases, etc.
Thanks so much, Michelle. You may have started to answer this already just now, but I'll just say, we had a question from the audience about when you say outreach, what all that consisted of. If you want to give any more details about that, you're welcome to do so.
I think the governor's addresses regarding Smart Start, we do social media outreach through our R&Rs, Child Care Resource and Referrals. We have INCRA, which is our intermediary who does the grants for us, who does all the payments. They have a wide reach to our providers. We have our family child care networks that do a lot of outreach for us. They're very good at getting the word out, and word of mouth from provider to provider. We found that is huge here within the state, especially when it comes to providing sort of that peer-to-peer learning. So,
yeah, that's great. Thanks, Michelle. That's something we've heard a lot in our Vote on Compensation learning community as well. Really the importance of those intermediary organizations that work directly with educators and programs all the time, and how helpful they can be in making sure that everyone is aware of the great initiatives that you all are putting together and how they can benefit, how they can implement them successfully. I'll just pause in case Lori, Amy, or Jose, you want to say anything else about outreach, communication with providers.
One additional item that I could contribute. Part of the way the grant is structured is through a monthly distribution. And so one of the communication tools we use is to require providers come in and recertify that they are, in fact, continuing their operations as they had initially submitted their registration for. And so part of that is that we have tools in our software that require the providers to read prompted scripts. So that's part of our outreach effort to ensure that they attest that they have read, updates and or news or that we have about the grant program. So we are sure that everyone who's receiving a distribution at least has attested that they are aware of some of the changes or updates that are coming on.
Okay, thank you, Jose. So we had a couple more clarifying questions come in, and then we'll keep going. First, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer for me, Amy, so that you get it right. The question was, is this state investment only for the state of Massachusetts, or was it also a Head Start investment for all the states? Like, did you use, general federal Head Start funding, or was it just funding that you put in from the state?
Oh, I'm having trouble with my Zoom. You can hear me now? Okay. Thanks so much. The way in which Head Start programs generally are funded is a direct federal to community level investment. The Head Start state supplemental funding that I was mentioning is a state investment by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And there are, I think, 30 something states that make similar types of investments in their Head Start programs as well. The way in which those investments look really do vary from state to state, though. In Massachusetts, again, it's a particular investment that our Commonwealth makes in our Head Start, early Head Start programs. The funds at this point are dedicated exclusively to workforce support and quality support. In some other states, sometimes slots are actually funded through their Head Start state supplemental dollars. And a good way for folks to find that information, if you don't know it already, is that each state has a position like mine within your state. There's a Head Start collaboration office within your state. And each state also has a Head Start association. And I have to say that in our state, this particular funding stream originated through advocacy from Head Start leaders, as well as from our Massachusetts Head Start Association. So anybody who's looking for that kind of info can go to their state equivalents as far as their Head Start Association or their collab office to get more information about state investments into Head Start that are on top of the federal investments.
Thanks so much for clarifying that, Amy. Really helpful. Lori, another clarifying question for you. Someone is asking about the 1.5 million that you mentioned before, and how much of that is allocated for the payroll tax?
Of that total, there's about $115,000 that is allocated for the payroll tax. Just because we do the, it's the 7.65%. And so that was how we came up with that. So it's like, around $115,000.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll keep the questions coming. We'll get to them as we can. So now what I want to do is hear from each of you about what you think has been the biggest success so far in your effort to improve compensation, and what you think has made the biggest difference in getting to that success. Or, if you're still getting started, what do you think is most promising so far? So we're going to go in reverse order. We're going to start with you, Amy. If you want to tell us about what you think has been successful so far, what you think is most promising.
Yeah, I would say that one of the big successes of the Massachusetts Head Start State Supplemental Grant really is this kind of continued relationship and partnership between the various entities that ensure that this funding continues. So it's a grant that's been around for over 20 years in Massachusetts. The investment recently has grown exponentially. So in the past 5 years, let me find my number, 81% growth in the Head Start State Supplemental Grant. And that's through kind of the continued support for Head Start, early Head Start programs, frankly exacerbated by or made more relevant by the pandemic and the way in which we all kind of stopped to look at the importance of early education and care and public investment in early education and care. But it's sort of this ongoing commitment that the Commonwealth has made to Head Start, Early Head Start, and to programs, educators serving our most vulnerable children and families. So I'll stop there, but I really see that as a huge success.
Thanks so much, Amy. All right, Jose, how about you? What do you think is the biggest success so far?
Caitlin, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking, in terms of the grants that you all have been working on, what do you think is the biggest success that you've seen so far, or what do you think has been most promising?
So I think what the biggest success, in my view, of the CT grant is the idea that providers were able to invest in their operations without necessarily passing that cost on to parents. And I think that that's been a huge issue, at least in Massachusetts, with the rising cost of childcare for parents. It's becoming slowly becoming inaccessible for a lot of folks, and is inaccessible for a lot of people. And I think that's kind of what we've been able to do to sort of mitigate that issue and solve for a lot of families and create accessibility.
Perfect. That's such an important point, Jose. Thank you. All right, Michelle, back over to you.
I knew her in my role, but through my lens, being able to create a system in which we're able to raise wages for childcare workers, which sustains the early care and education workforce is huge. Coming from that same seat, 20 plus years ago, I can say that we've come leaps and bounds, and being able to do this work now is, I think, critical, right? We are investing in raising the wage floor for these workers and putting these grants out, and then making it sustainable and investing in these grants and these contracts. In my opinion, that is what I've seen is the biggest success, is that Illinois is putting an investment in this work and programs that promote workforce and making childcare and early education attractive, right? Because it hasn't always been that way. It's not been a career that most people find attractive, or because of monetarily, it hasn't always been. But if we make it so, I think that's it's shifting, right? People love kids, but yet they don't always love this side. This is the downside, but we're kind of shifting the narrative, right? So I think that is what these initiatives are doing for Illinois.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know one of the things that I've been really excited to hear you talk about, Michelle, is how you were really intentionally thinking about how to support programs to at least get to certain benchmarks for raising compensation. So, you talked about how you're trying to raise the wage floor, so everybody gets at least a little bit of a higher wage than they're getting. I've heard you talk about parity, and maybe we can say more about that if you'd like, but just really hearing you say, in our Smart Start grants, we're thinking about this. In our apprenticeship pilot, we're thinking about, how sites can use a pay scale. And so I think that's really exciting and really promising effort.
We we have partners in all of this work. It's not like we're doing it all ourselves. We're really thinking intentionally about how to serve the most how raising the pay scale at the right amount will serve the most amount of children and families and the workforce, but doing it in a way that makes the most sense. And that's why we are having these focus groups. Right now, actually, they're happening next week and the week after. So that way we can make really intentional and informed decisions about how we roll out our workforce compensation contracts and the cost model. We're updating that as we speak. So
That's terrific. Thanks, Michelle. All right, Lori, we didn't forget about you. We want to hear about, what you think has been most successful or most promising in your effort to do this $2 an hour raise.
Thank you. I would say there have been some unintended consequences that we're really excited about. One of those is that we have had programs raise their base wage in order to be eligible to participate. And so that then impacts not only the professionals who are participating, but all of the professionals in that program when the base wage is raised. We've had programs who have started participating in a quality demonstration program who had not previously, again, in order to be eligible to participate here. And we have seen programs who have raised their cap on childcare assistance enrollment in order to meet these guidelines. So we've seen some of those kinds of unintended consequences that we've been really excited about. The other thing that we've been really pleasantly surprised to hear is the number of programs who are saying how excited their staff are to be able to participate and what a big deal this is. One of them said, I kept telling our staff, all of this work at the quality demonstration will be worth it because we're going to have this additional resource. We've seen so far, we haven't been doing it very long, but we've seen really good retention. And the programs who are participating seem to be having an easier time of recruiting new staff to fill those gaps than they did prior to the enhancement. So all of those have been really promising for us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So just looking at some of the questions that have come in, someone was asking about anything that has worked for private childcare or family childcare centers in your states. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Lori, Michelle, and Jose, you were all talking about initiatives that are available to private childcare. Do any of you want to come up and say a little bit more about that, or just it's open if you'd like to?
So all of our Smart Start transition grants are available to family childcare homes, group childcare homes, private childcare. You just have to meet all of the requirements, and the reporting requirements. If you are a family childcare provider or a private childcare center, you could apply for the scholarship programs. You can, private childcare centers could participate in our Smart Start Quality Supports program. It's not open currently, but those are for downstate providers outside of the city of Chicago. So yes, so there are many opportunities for investments in the workforce for those entities. Absolutely.
So for our wage enhancement program, that is just for centers, and it's private centers primarily. We have other funds that we've invested into the child development home workforce. We have grants for equipment, outdoor equipment. We have training grants. We have business opportunity grants. So what we found was that a $2 an hour wage enhancement didn't fit very well with the way home childcare operates and how they fund and pay themselves, basically. So our investment in those home childcares comes in a different form of other grants that they're eligible to receive.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kaylee.
No, go ahead.
So in Massachusetts, the majority of childcare centers actually are FCCs or family childcare. Again, going back to the issue around flexibility for funds, our focus was to ensure that there was some incentive to start family childcare centers as well as maintain their presence. And I should have mentioned earlier, one of the successes of the program, during the early part of the pandemic, the state lost something to the effect of about 30,000 childcare slots during that time, and the program has we've essentially rebounded that time from that period. A lot of that is attributed to the C3 funds or the childcare stabilization funds that were available to the private centers as well as to the public centers as well.
Great, thank you all. We have just a ton of great stuff coming in from folks. One person asked about the healthcare premiums that I mentioned at the start. I'll just quickly say, we know that places like Washington, D.C. Have been paying healthcare premiums. Washington State was doing that with ARP funds. And somebody else asked, if there will be a toolkit available resources after this, but also you should know that along with the recording, we're going to send out a bunch of really key resources. In particular, our center has developed just kind of a table of key actions that states have taken around compensation, which includes, a little bit on the healthcare premiums, on the childcare benefits that I mentioned earlier. So we can't get to everything today. We had to, just pick and choose what we could cover, but please know that we will provide you with some additional resources as well. I also just wanted to highlight this really terrific comment from someone in the audience who said, wouldn't it be great if all states would invest in childcare like these states? And I couldn't agree more. That's such a terrific comment. Thank you for that. And let's see. So we have a little bit of time left. I think what I'd like to do now is just give each of you an opportunity to go around and say, what's your top lesson that you've learned from this work that you've been doing, or your one key takeaway that you really want to share with this audience. So I'm going to start with Amy.
I think one of my key takeaways is the way in which it's fascinating to hear the various ways in which different states and communities are making these investments in the workforce. One of my takeaways, just from this conversation more broadly, not specific to the Head Start State Supplemental Grant though, is that there's still continued need for investment in the workforce and thinking about kind of creative ways that we incentivize folks to come into the field and then to stay in the field. Certainly thinking about at the state level, the opportunity to make investments like the Head Start State Supplemental Grant, it's a tremendous way that we can support our Head Start programs. And it's part of a larger compensation strategy and part of a larger way in which we're thinking about the importance of early education and care as a public good. So less kind of targeted to the Head Start State SEP, but that's sort of my big takeaway and what I'm thinking about as I listen to my colleagues in other states and to Jose reflect on the strategies that you're using.
Thanks, Amy, and that seems like a natural follow-on. So Jose, would you like to share your key takeaway?
Well, I hate to repeat what Amy said, but she took the words out of my mouth. But I guess what I'll add is, I think uh, it's presenting an understanding to local leadership that while this investment was triggered because of the pandemic, this investment was needed before the pandemic, and there's continued need after the pandemic. This is one of the fields that has been, I think, ignored to a great extent for far too long. And conveying that understanding to your local leadership, to your state leadership, and underlying the importance and the implications of what funding means to the overall economy, and connecting those dots, I think, is very, very important, and is what we're finding. It's becoming more and more important to ensure that funding is maintained.
Thank you, Jose. Michelle, how about you? What would you like to share with us?
Yeah, just to echo off of what Jose said, it's really reassuring to know that our state is continuing this investment past these federal relief dollars, that we're really continuing to see that they realize that early care and education is essential to our state system, right? We are an essential part of what's happening, and that we continue to invest in that. Right? We know the more we invest while they're young, the less we'll have to invest when they're older, right? So it only makes sense, and it shouldn't have taken a pandemic crisis to realize that early care and education was so critical. So
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Michelle. All right, Lori, what's your key takeaway or lesson learned that you want to share with us all?
We have found that, in addition, I would echo what everyone else has said, and we've also found that we can't do it with our public dollars alone, just because of the uncertainty of that and the nature of public dollars. So one of the big parts of our program is soliciting private donations, having business buy-in. And we've explored a couple of different models. One is that businesses would donate, would contribute $150 per year for every employee, every full-time employee that they have. We've also explored other models of having levels of participation. We partnered with our local community foundation, and they set up a charitable giving account. So any donation that comes in from a business or contribution from a business is tax deductible, and that incentivizes them as well. So we ask them to look at it similar to a dependent care account, where you can get that money taken out pre-tax, or it's a tax deduction. That's essentially what we're talking about. So asking businesses to contribute. They can also take it as a tax deduction. They can also consider it to be a human resources cost, but that we aren't going to be able to sustain this with just our public dollars. Our private partnerships are key.
All right, thank you, Lori. And one of the things that I have heard some of you say, and is a key lesson learned from me, from our Bold on Compensation learning community as well, is just how important it is for each of you to be able to share your stories with each other, to be able to hear from folks in other communities, other states, about what you're trying, what's working, what isn't working, how you do it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today to talk to us all and share your learnings with everyone. Really excited for folks to potentially follow up with you later. I know we'll be sharing out your information that you shared with us. So thanks so much.
I realized I was on mute. I want to thank our moderator and all of our wonderful panelists for the information that they shared. I hope that all of you who are on today have found it to be very valuable. Like we said at the top of the webinar, we will be sending out this recording to everyone who signed up, as well as all of the resources that you will find links for it within the slides and other resources that we think are appropriate and helpful. You will also be able to find this information on our website. So if you know someone, you want to share it, it will be available for that as well. So once again, we want to thank our panelists for joining us, and we're going to take our final poll. I had this problem earlier that I was not able to see the poll, but they did say it was up. So I'm not sure if others are seeing it. We will give a second to see if it does come up. We want to also make an announcement. You will see in the chat in the Q&A, there the poll popped up. What workforce sector are you representing? As you guys take that poll, I just wanted to let you know today there is AmeriCorps State and National is hosting a webinar highlighting a new federal funding opportunity that will prioritize investments in early learning and prepare AmeriCorps members to enter early learning centers. So there is information available for that webinar today. And if we could see the results quickly. So thank you. Most of you are representing Head Start and Early Head Start, followed by childcare and family childcare. So we want to thank you for coming out, and we hope that you will find the resources that we share with you very useful. Once again, there is an AmeriCorps webinar just getting ready to start. You can find us at our website, at our is located here, as well. If you have follow-up questions, any questions that did not get answered in the webinar, we will try to answer them and provide a FAQ. You can also email us. Our email address is also found on this, on the sorry for the background noise, is also found on the slide. And lastly, we would want you to visit our website also to sign up for our e-blast if you have not already done so. That will provide you opportunities to receive an e-blast for us with resources, as well as be informed of upcoming webinars. We also want to let everyone know we do have an informational webinar coming up on September 26th regarding our foundational series. If you attended the foundational series intro webinar in August, you do not need to attend this one. This is a repeat of that information for an opportunity for us to answer questions for those who may have missed it. And this TA opportunity will start in October. So we wanted an opportunity. Also, if you signed up for any of our intro webinars, you will receive an email about open office hours. So that is also forthcoming. And then last but not least, we will be offering a campaign around recruitment and retention October 3rd through the 5th, where we will have a series of webinars and a toolkit for resources around recruitment and outreach. Again, thank you for your time this afternoon. Please complete your post-webinar survey. Thank you.